Oh, the Vita-Saw. Look, normally these guides go over the stats of the weapon, how to use it properly, and where it fits in with the rest of the medic's lineup of options. But this one is a little more difficult because I genuinely think there's not a single reason to ever equip the Vita-Saw in a match of TF2. It doesn't even have the amputator or syringe guns bonus of being suboptimal, but at least kind of fun sometimes. It's just bad. But I'll do my best to explain anyways, I guess. The Vita-Saw grants you an organ every time you successfully hit an enemy player with it. And for each organ collected, you can retain up to 15% of your Uber charge, win, or if you die. This caps out at 4 organs, preserving up to 60% charge. Note that this is a flat 15%, not 15% of your current Uber charge. This means that if you perish with 1 or more organs at only 10% charge, you will respawn with all 10% that you had when you died. This upside is paired with the downside of losing 10 maximum health, bringing you to 140 health instead of 150. As a result of this decrease, your maximum overheal will also be reduced from 225 down to 210 HP. And like the Ubersaw, the weapon's little vial is a visual indicator of your current Ubercharge percentage. It fills up as you approach 100, which is a nice little touch. Where the weapon differs from the Ubersaw is in its ability to give you an organ even when slapping a disguised spy or even an Ubered player. Technically, you could use this to spy check, as you won't get the organ if you hit a real teammate, but still you probably shouldn't enter a melee fight with a spy. You might get face stabbed anyway, and I wouldn't recommend it. But if you do notice a disguised spy that isn't aware of you, might as well collect your free organ. Unfortunately, just like with banners, you will lose any organs you have obtained if you use a resupply bind in spawn, which is pretty cringe to be honest. I use these all the time, and I kept deleting my organs while gathering clips for this video. Along with this, you obviously can't do any shenanigans where you get a few organs then switch to a more useful melee, since the Ubercharge refund caps at 4, while still retaining the benefit in death. As soon as you switch off the Vita-Saw, the organs go with it. However, the organs from the Vita-Saw do interact with other collection type weapons such as the Eyelander, Airstrike, Bizarre Bargain, and even other Vita-Saw medics. If you kill a player wielding one of those weapons, you will receive organs equal to their current number of heads, organs, whatever. I bring this up because with the Vita-Saw in particular, you are much more likely to feed heads to an enemy Demo Knight than gain extra organs yourself. In fact, if you're going to die to a Demo Knight, it may be a better option to avoid swinging with the Vita or even kill binding to avoid giving them an instant 3 or 4 heads when killing you, especially if you're at a low percent and those organs wouldn't help out in any meaningful way. Of course, the more organs you have, the more Uber you will preserve, so you may still want some extra reserves if you're at a higher percent. It's a tough call. Give their Demo Knight an extra head to save an extra 15%, and I'm not going to say there's a definitive answer. Your mileage may vary from game to game, and sometimes saving some Uber percentage is really what the Vita-Saw does. Look, I'm going to try and be generous here and explain where and how the Vita-Saw can theoretically be useful, but it's not a good weapon, and we'll go over the specifics of why in a moment. The idea behind the design of the Vita-Saw seems to be giving the medic an option to at least partially mitigate the most punishing aspect of dying, resetting your Uber charge all the way back to 0, which is an enticing idea. It's just the execution of that prospect in the current iteration of the Vita-Saw that's the problem. So let's talk about the good first. Obviously, saving Uber charge can be nice. I won't lie, that feeling when you die or drop to something completely unexpected and respawn with 30, 45, or even 60% charge makes those deaths feel much less impactful to the overall game. Because of that, my favorite personal aspect of the Vita-Saw is how aggressive I could play when I had organs. Once I had 3 or 4 of these bad boys, I was much more apt to play risky and forward with my team as death became less punishing. Ideally, you don't die or drop anyway, but that little extra security tilts the risk versus reward scale slightly in your favor. Even more so on the Quick Fix and Kritzkrieg, the 2 Mediguns you are apt to not only play more aggressively than on stock, but also have the possibility of dying mid-Uber. In the event of an untimely demise during your pop, any organs you have will still let you keep up to the maximum amount of charge based on that number as your Uber drains. This does give the Vita-Saw a slight edge, and I mean slights, with either of these Mediguns. Although you should be aware that the maximum health negative will further reduce your self-overheal during a mega heal to a measly 175 HP. I also think that Vita is better on offense compared to defense because of this extra aggression and the lower respawn times, further reducing death's punishment and letting you get another offensive pop-off as soon as possible after respawning. Yes, saving Uber on death can give you some extra reassurance on defense, where you often need a charge to exchange with the enemy's offensive pop, but we'll discuss later how for that saved Uber to have a tangible impact, you need to pop within the window before you would have built up your charge from 0 without the Vita-Saw. And it is much easier to do that on offense rather than defense. In a hypothetical, even if you were to die with stock Uber to a defensive team's Kritzkrieg while playing offense, with enough organs, you can completely nullify the Uber disad you normally would have been at and get your invuln back before the risk of dying to another crit sticky. On paper, that sounds very good as it takes away the usual Uber advantage of killing an enemy medic with your charge. The problem is, even in those specific cherry-picked situations where the weapon could feel alright, it's still not worth using. In fact, it is likely medic's worst melee, and that's including stock in the conversation. And all of that stems from the upside not even being close to the downside, alongside the weapon getting worse as you improve your medic positioning and survivability overall. The Vita-Saw has a passive downside in that -10 health or an active upside that requires you to hit an enemy, and enemy engagements are usually the #1 thing on your list of situations to avoid when playing medic, especially when you willingly nerfed your health bar by equipping this weapon. Compare this with your other options like the Solemn Vow, which has a completely passive upside for an active downside. And while the Ubersaw and Amputator also only have active upsides, at least they have passive downsides alongside them, so you aren't harming yourself when you're unable to make use of said upsides. It's a fact that in a game where you can't make use of an organ, having the Vita-Saw equipped simply makes you more vulnerable on the class that is all about living. At least when you can't get an Ubersaw swing or Amputator taunt off, they're just kind of there, not doing anything useful, but not doing much negative either. And I know the swing speed or damage from those weapons' respective downsides could technically make a difference in a 1v1, but not in the way a permanent -10 health does. They really aren't comparable. I'm going to guess most of you watching this video don't actually have the Vita-Saw equipped in your melee slot right now, but you don't even need experience with the weapon to realize that -10 health is the biggest downside on any medic melee. I want you to think back on all those times you lived with single-digit health, surfing a rocket and barely living the fall damage, reaching that health pack right before burning to death, or just eating a bit too much spam before being body shot. All those moments where you barely squeak out alive, those would have been deaths with the Vita-Saw. Using this weapon gets you killed more than not using it. Plain and simple. And on medic, that's really bad. I call these Vita-Saw moments, where you would have lived if you just had anything else in your melee slots. Right here on Upward, I was admittedly playing pretty forward and eating too much spam. It was bad positioning on my part, I'll admit that. But just as I make a dive for cover, this opposing sniper quickscope body shots me for 50 damage. According to my calculations, without the -10 health, I would have survived this shot. And sure, I might have eaten a little more damage and died anyway, or I might not and have barely lived. We'll never know because I was using the Vita-Saw. And even when it doesn't get you directly killed, having less health makes some damage thresholds feel a bit riskier. Once you hit around 90 to 100 health on med, you should be feeling uneasy, as a pipe or soldier bomb is enough to send you to the respawn queue without any counterplay. And once you're down at 60 or 70 HP, you should be craving a health pack fast or just getting anywhere you can't eat any more spam at all. These thresholds are ever so slightly easier to reach when starting at 140 health. For example, getting body shot for 50 takes you directly to 90 instead of 100, meaning you would have to regen for a couple of seconds to survive a pipe. That just feels bad and more than cancels out the extra aggression the weapon provides when you actually have some organs in the bank. I don't want to make it seem like the health nerf from Vita-Saw is the end of the world for a medic player. It's not. In fact, the better you get at medic, and as your positioning improves, you'll notice it less and less. I wouldn't say it affected my gameplay significantly when using the weapon, but it still is a far greater downside than any other melee. Turns out that giving the class that wants to die as little as possible a weapon that rewards death in a way, while also making it easier to die, doesn't create the best combination, particularly when you need to swing and hit an enemy in order to receive that more rewarding death in the first place. At that point, why aren't you just using the Ubersaw and getting 25% you can use right now instead of 15% you might get to use later after you die? Not to mention, when you do die and even preserve some Uber, it's not like you really gained Uber in the same sense as you do with the Ubersaw. You just didn't lose it. They are kind of the same thing, except you do need to die, which means you're still going to be missing out on all the healing, buffs, and more Uber charge you could have built while you were dead. That means with only 1 or 2 organs, you're actually just about breaking even, not gaining anything at all. All of this adds up to a weapon that is hard to see the use in. In fact, it was nigh impossible to get clips for this video of the Vita-Saw actually doing anything that I would consider game-changing enough to highlight an actual strength of the weapon. The vast majority of the time, if I was playing seriously, I barely used it, and it maybe saved me 15 or 30% once a game. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but do you know what weapons I had no problem getting clips for their respective videos? The Ubersaw and Solemn Vow. I just played games, and good things happen sometimes. Almost like those weapons are actually useful or something. The list of sequential occurrences that needs to be fulfilled for this weapon to make a notable impact is frankly absurd compared to the other options. Step 1, you need to hit an enemy player with your melee to get an organ. Again, if this is happening, why aren't you using the Ubersaw? But maybe you're just getting a swing off before you inevitably die, so technically Ubersaw wouldn't have done anything. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt. And this was how I got most of my organs in my games. I was in a situation where I was going to die anyways, so I hopefully got a swing off and could at least save 15%. But still, if you were in a situation with more than 75%, you could have hit them with Saw and panic pop to possibly live, which would be better as your team wouldn't be without a med, and you can immediately start building again, so the preserved Uber is essentially nullified by the time you would have spent in the respawn queue. But anyway, let's just say this is a rare moment where the Vita-Saw would be more valuable than the Ubersaw. After you get your organ, or organs, you need to die before the round is over. If you don't die, then the organs can't do anything. And not only do you need to die, but when you die, you need to have enough Uber for your organs to preserve some of that charge. This is actually easier said than done, because usually, one of the most common times to die as a medic is immediately post-Uber if you play too aggressively during your charge. Organs won't do anything for you if you're dying at 0%. And generally, I wouldn't say respawning with 15% Uber is likely to do much of anything, as you can build that back in at most 6 seconds on stock. So you usually need 2 or more organs to feel the Uber preservation. But again, let's give the weapon the benefit of the doubt and say those 6 seconds actually will matter. Now you need to not die in the next life or win or lose the round before you reach 100%, or your organs from the previous life effectively did nothing once again. I mean, what good is preserving some extra charge if you never even had the opportunity to pop it? So now you need to actually use your Uber charge once you reach 100%, but not just any time after you reach 100%, you need to use it quickly, within that brief window of the extra percent you preserved with your organs. If you don't pop your charge within this window, you would have had time to build back up to 100 anyways without the Vita-Saw, so again, your organs did nothing. For example, if one organ saves you 6 seconds of building, then you need to pop within 6 seconds of reaching full charge, or you would have had time to get that pop anyway. This is the main reason Vita-Saw is better on offense, as you can more reliably pop as soon as you get to try and push forward. On defense, when not running crits, you're usually holding on to your Uber until the offense tries pushing in, using your charge to ward off their advance. Finally, your Uber better actually do something. It better have an impact on the game. If it doesn't, then did it really matter that you were able to get back to 100% a tiny bit quicker than you normally would have? When you play Medic properly, the chances that this specific sequence of events plays out in an actual match are slim, and that's still being overly generous. In reality, it almost never happens. Free organ, chat, free organ. Imagine if that just actually gave me my Uber charge though. I have 3 organs. 3, dude. And the round's over. And I died with no percent, dude. It doesn't do anything because I died after my... Oh my god, dude. It still does nothing. I got 4% chat. 4. And just because I think it's funny, let's look at the list of occurrences that needs to happen for the Solemn Vow to be useful and make an impact. You need to have the weapon equipped, and then you need to look at an enemy and read the health number or Uber percent number. That's it. Congratulations, the Solemn Vow had some impact. I'm not saying that seeing some health numbers is comparable to saving 60% of your Uber charge on death, but you can actually use the Vow's upside and use it often with basically 0 drawbacks. In the over 20 hours I spent using this weapon, this is the singular clip I was able to get where I can say for certain that the Vita-Saw did something notable. After getting caught out by the opposing medic's stock Uber charge, I was able to spawn in with 30% from the couple of organs I got earlier. That 30% turned what would have been disad into a slight Uber advantage. A just big enough ad that let me pop in upon reaching 100% and kill the red medic before they were able to get Uber, thus winning the push and securing the next point. Without that 30% for from Vita-Saw, this play would not have been possible. But just think about that. In over 20 hours, I had a single situation where I could confidently say the Vita-Saw really did something. Of course, this wasn't the only time that I spawned in with some percentage and made use of a few organs. When that happens, it's mostly just, oh hey, 15%, nice. This was the first time that having organs did something genuinely very impactful on the game and allowed me to make a winning play I otherwise wouldn't have been able to. While making this video, I cannot tell you how many games the Vita-Saw did absolutely nothing for me but reduced my health by 10. But I can tell you that it was almost all of them. Take this game on Borneo, for example. First of all, they had a scout using bonk. It physically hurt me not to have the Ubersaw equipped here. Imagine if I was able to get a free 100% off this scout with the saw rather than a few lousy organs. Oh well, at least now I can preserve some extra charge with the organs I saved up, right? Except I just didn't die for the rest of the offense. I've lost count of the number of times that I've gotten a few organs only to go the rest of the round or game without ever dying, or dying but then losing the round before I respawn in the case of defense. And even this entire Dust Bowl offense, a map known for being a meat grinder with plenty of opportunities to farm organs or die trying. You may be inclined to think that my ability to panic pop this Uber was due to the charge my organs preserved, but being close to 100% was the only reason I was playing aggressively in the first place. If I wasn't close to popping, I would have still been chilling in the tunnel, ensuring I got that juicy 100% before walking forward. And that Uber didn't exactly win us the round. So while Vita at least did something here, I'm not sure it was what I would classify as game-changing or particularly worth it. Things like this happen a ton with the Vita-Saw, where even when it seems like it might be doing something useful, when you zoom out and think about it, not so much. And these were some of the games I managed to get some organs in the first place, and it still had less than 0 impact. That 140 health, even like the chip damage like that just feels like so much worse. Bro, that would have been an Uber charge, man. Look at these guys. It would have been an Uber. They're just here to feed me, and I'm using the Vita-Saw. 4 organs, dude. 4 organs for that. That's 100%. Wow. And once again, dude, I had my 6 organs, but I'm just too good. In most games, I never got a single organ at all because I'm usually not on the lookout for enemies to smack with my melee on medic. I have better things to do. Spies were probably my main source of organs, but I still wouldn't recommend trying that, as the rogue face stab will be a net negative over the organs you manage to extract from bad spies. It's just really hard to find a game or situation where the Vita-Saw does anything. More often than not, it's just kind of there and you're at 140 HP. But I guess I'll do my due diligence and discuss how the Vita-Saw performs on the 4 options for Mediguns. But by now you should know the vibe of the video is just don't use it if you're playing seriously. Vita isn't horrible on stock, but the weapons are kind of at odds in terms of playstyle. On the one hand, saving Uber on invuln is the most impactful use of organs because every 15% equates to 6 seconds of building, and stock is, of course, the strongest charge overall. However, I usually play stock with the most risk-adverse playstyle compared to the other Mediguns. So while every once in a while the Vita did do something, it was mostly just sitting there doing a whole lot of nothing. The downside wasn't really affecting me because I was playing it safe anyway, so being at 140 health didn't matter too much, but due to that safety, I wasn't exactly getting opportunities to melee and get some organs, or even dying all that often to begin with. If you're going to use the Vita-Saw, I wouldn't recommend using it on stock. You might as well use basically anything else. The Kritzkrieg is probably the best use case for Vita-Saw. You can die during the Uber quite easily compared to the other options, so having organs will at least preserve some of your charge in the event something goes horribly wrong during your pop, and spawning in with some charge just also feels nicer with crits, letting you use that build rate to get back to 100% extremely quickly and possibly even catch an opposing medic off guard with a slightly earlier pop. Crits is by far the most use it as soon as you get it charge, so it's also easier to pop within the window the preserved Uber has afforded you. And just like crits, you could die during mega heal, giving Vita at least a slight edge on quick fix, and similar to crits, I usually end up popping very soon after getting to 100% because more situations crop up where a mega heal might be at least of some use. However, with the quick fix, I had by far the most deaths at a low Uber charge percentage, where they didn't exactly save anything. So it's still kind of usable, I suppose, but still a strict downgrade to better melees like Saw, Vow, and even the Amputator. Last but not least, I am inclined to believe that the Vita-Saw is awful when paired with the Vaccinator. You build extremely quickly on Vac. The Uber Preserve from organs is much less valuable when you can build 15% in about 3 seconds of beaming a damaged teammate. Not only that, you are more likely to have less overall Uber charge due to that charge system, so there's a much greater chance that even organs you manage to get don't do as much. And with those charges, death is already much less punishing than any other Medigun. I don't see a single reason to use this melee ever on the Vaccinator. I'd always rather have the 10 extra health. And that seems to be the overall story of this weapon. In almost every game I've played with it, I'd rather have 10 more health. Even factoring out how obviously better alternatives like Ubersaw and Solemn Vow are, the Vita-Saw's propensity to do nothing most games except reduce your max HP means I'd rather be on Bonesaw probably 80% of the time. Bonesaw won't do any great good for me, but at least I know it's not going to directly get me killed every once in a while. And I just had to bring up this idea from a YouTube comment that since Vita-Saw works even while you're popping, if your Uber charge is bad or your patient dies, you can tactically kill bind to save some percent if you have organs. At this point, I'm pretty desensitized from people in comment sections bringing up hyper-specific scenarios that rarely crop up where their favorite weapon actually does something to explain why certain takes and mindsets that have demonstrably worked are wrong. But this just may be the most insane form of copium I have ever seen to justify the use of a weapon. Let me get this straight. This person makes the claim that rather than trying to position better, learn to avoid popping Uber on bad players at suboptimal times, and not overextending during those charges, you could just use the Vita-Saw and willingly kill bind during your charge. But of course, only after you successfully farm up enough organs for it to make a difference. Why force the enemy team to kill you when you could just press a button and do it for them? Now it might be the moment. Look, I can heal this heavy up with my quick fix Uber. Oh, it's not gonna do anything. It's not gonna do anything. I'm out. I'm out. Cancel, cancel, cancel. If you ever come out of retirement and I'm full of shit in scrims, me kill binding on last because I don't think the Uber is gonna be good enough. Look at this. Hey, oh my god, I almost just ate it. They will never expect me to have another quick fix Uber this quickly. It will blow their minds, chat. The offensive team will be like, what? He just quick fixed in. How is he doing it again? I thought I was Uber tracking this guy. Look at, we already have the charge. And we're already popping it. I'm gonna go insane. Look, no one truly cares all that much if you use a suboptimal weapon in the game, but please, I'm tired of the constant need for people to justify their choices by pretending they're actually good. I make guides, so I have to tell it like it is, not use circular logic to explain why my favorite weapons are actually the best because of X, Y, and Z scenario. Just use the weapon if you like it, but don't try to explain to me that it is anyway actually worth using. All right, organs! I got backstab! I got backstab! Dude, this guy's such an idiot, dude! He's so stupid! He thinks I dropped this Uber? I only dropped half of it, dude! I'm right back there, baby! Holy! It's crazy, chat. Chat, you've never seen such Vita-Saw value. The Vita-Saw is a bad medic weapon. Will it completely sabotage your gameplay and turn you into a horrible player? No. I played many a game where I still did extremely well with both this thing and stock syringe gun equipped while making the video. It will always be the player that makes the medic, not the loadout. In fact, if you're positioning properly, the 140 health usually doesn't really do anything. I won't say it adversely affected me in a major way most of my games, but if you're positioning correctly, you will most likely never really use the upside either. So in a sense, it's still usually worse than a melee that that just does nothing. So while the downside doesn't exactly get you killed super often, it still drastically overshadows even the weapon's potential upside. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you are able to make use of the Vita-Saw's upside routinely in your own games, you are likely out of position, fighting too many enemies with your melee, and dying way too often. Simply put, you're using the Vita-Saw as a crutch to attempt to overcome your own skill issues. Equip a better melee and focus on improving at the game instead. Oh, we got 95%, dude. How can we drop this Uber? I shouldn't have said anything.